The U.S. nuclear waste, quote, we are sitting on $100 trillion, end quote. Welcome, everyone. This is me, Armando Cavanha. Let me show the card. And this is Stephen, Stephen Curtis. Stephen has a strong experience, fantastic experience in project management and leadership across government, military, academy, and so on. And the focus that I know him is on the nuclear energy, and that this is fantastic conversation every day that we have conversation with him. Welcome, Steve. It's a pleasure for me.
Thank you, Armando. I appreciate being here.
Perfect, fantastic. Steve, let me put you a little bit bigger here. Yeah. You mentioned in your article that only 3% of energy from nuclear fuel is used, remaining 97% unused. So my conclusion is an inefficient process, isn't it?
Yes, it is inefficient to the point that we do need a new technology to take care of this. It was the original technology that was going to be done with the private sector, the breeding of new fuel from the uranium. But once they found a lot of uranium, and once the Navy chose to do light water reactors, then the industry kind of went to the light water reactor side, which really only uses about 3% of the enriched fuel. They enrich the fuel up to about 4% of the fissile material U-235. So to do that, they have to spin it really fast as a gas and separate it into a lower stream of enrichment and a higher stream of enrichment. When they get to about 4%, then they make the fuel back to a solid, make the fuel out of it. So when they do that, all they're doing is fissioning the U-235 part of it that they enriched, and some of the U-238 will get burned. The way the U-238 gets used is it won't fission by itself, but if it adds a neutron, it can become plutonium-239, which will fission. So some of that happens in a light water reactor. At the end of the process, though, what we have is sort of a witch's brew of about 3% of the fission products. That's the 3% that we got the energy from. Some of the higher level actinides, which means a neutron got added, and they made higher level isotopes of different different isotopes of what they call actinides, which are more or transuranics, which are heavier than uranium. And then most of that is plutonium that can be fissioned. All the actinides can be fissioned. And then what's left is still about 1% of that fissile U-235. It's just so low in enrichment now that it doesn't make sense to continue. And since they have lots of uranium, they just take more uranium, enrich it, and make new fuel and set this aside.
Mm-hmm.
What we're proposing to do is use a technology called fast reactor technology. So in a light water reactor, the water slows the neutrons down, so it's more likely that they'll be captured by the uranium-235 nucleus. When you have a fast fission reactor, you do have to engineering it a little bit different. But when there's fast neutrons, a couple good things happen. First of all, the fission products don't get in the way. When the neutrons are slow, they're more likely to take up some of the neutrons within the fission products. But when they're fast, they don't do hardly any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you do fission, but now it takes two neutrons instead of one, because you have to activate the U-238, then you have to fission the 239.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different process and it's a different thought process. But on a fast reactor, you can take that 97% of the material, either change it or fission it, and
Mm-hmm.
get all the energy out of it. Now we say 90%, go from 3% to 90%, because no process is exactly perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But we think that it's worth taking that uranium-238 and turning it into fissile energy. Because you remember there's 50 million times more energy comes out from a fission than comes from a coal atom burning.
Mm-hmm.
There's 50 million more times energy that comes out from each event of that. So
Yeah.
this is why nuclear power is so
So strong,
advantageous.
so important.
So
But
we're really talking about a new not a new technology, but a new approach to commercializing the technology.
Commercialize, yeah. So it means that the 97% remaining energy is not the same quality of the 3% first use it. It's different.
Yes. We're taking the easy way out on the first run through. We're doing thermal neutrons, real slow neutrons, very little energy, and so they're easy to fission. And we're only using the U-235 that's there. Now, towards the end of the process, some of the U-238 will change to plutonium-239, and some of that gets fission towards the end, but not nearly all of it.
Perfect.
So what we really do is only get 3% of the energy out that turns to fission products. The rest of it is still available to make energy.
It's useful, of course.
Yes, useful,
And how did you calculate $100 trillion that you are sitting on?
All right, so I'll let you guys do the math if you want to, but I'll tell you how it works out. So we're about 20% of our power in this country comes from nuclear power.
Okay.
And about 20% of power comes from nuclear power. It takes about 2,000 tons of fuel to make that 20%. Okay. So if you calculate that out, we have 90,000 metric tons sitting on the pallet. That would be 45 years of normal fission, but we get 30 times the energy out of it.
Okay.
You do that math, you get 270 years of fuel that really is just sitting around. Now, the really bad side of that is our current mindset is to bury all that. Right now, it looks like it'll cost about $400 billion to bury that, and that's just one repository. So what I'm trying to get the mindset changed to is, why don't we use that to make energy instead of burying it to just throw it away? And then, of course, people don't want it buried anywhere in their state. No state wants to bury it. So we're at this crossroads here. We're at this stoppage point where there is no solution. We're just proposing that you look at this solution as a potential to do it, and we think it's important that the private industry does it, not the government, because the government hasn't figured it out for 45 years. They may just wait another 45 years to figure it out. We just have to face facts that some things government does good and some things they don't. And this is something they really haven't figured out.
Yeah. You mentioned that the technology needed for this purpose is proven. So there is a failure proof. But what would a failure mean in this case?
Excuse me, ask me again, Armando.
Yeah, sure. What's a failure in this case?
Well, the only failure that I can see is if a state cannot convince the government to go along with it.
A political failure.
A political failure, yes. Because when the Manhattan Project, the Manhattan Project was the bomb project. Well, all the scientists in the Manhattan Project started thinking about, nuclear for private industry. Eisenhower picked up on that and had a big push to get the nuclear power going. Their original thought was fast neutron technology or breeder reactor technology. And so the Navy went into the business of making nuclear power, and they were very aggressive at that. And they were able to get the nuclear reactors to go into the submarines, first submarines. Now they're in aircraft carriers that powered the whole ship. So when that technology came to fruition, they wanted to make sure that they got the best deal for the Navy. So their idea was to use a light water reactor, not a fast reactor. And so that's where the focus went, because the Navy had the money to do it. And Rickover, was very persuasive. So that's what they started making, light water reactors for the Navy. But of course, the Navy can use highly enriched uranium, which simplifies the fissioning process quite a bit. But remember, when you make enriched uranium, you get more uranium that's depleted. Okay, because it starts out at 0.7% uranium-235. You can't change that. So if you make 4% enriched, you're going to get 6 times that amount of depleted uranium. So the depleted uranium is piled up. And if you get highly enriched to 90 or 95%, you're going to get 140 times as much of that as depleted uranium. So that depleted uranium can be used to activate and fission. and it's just sitting in stockpiles now.
Okay.
So there's a lot more that we can go forward with than just the spent fuel that's sitting on the tarmac. But until we do that, we really can't do it. Now, that technology was performed in a reactor in Idaho from about 1964 to about 1994. They ran this reactor for 30 years, very low power, but to prove the concept. And so they continually took spent fuel and reprocessed it during that time. Chemically took the spent fuel portion and enriched the 238 and made the power out of it on a solid fuel basis. There is available something called a liquid fuel basis where you can chlorinate. All you do is take off the containers, shave down all the material, make it into chlorine, and mix it in with a salt.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get the reactor going, you have to start it with fissile material to get it going.
Mm-hmm.
And once you figure out what they call the neutron economy, make sure you have enough neutrons to do all this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You basically can trickle in this fuel as a chlorine into this mixture every so often. And as much as you trickle in, that's how much energy you'll get.
Mm-hmm.
So you can easily get 3-4 gigawatt reactors out of this, or you can make them 10 megawatt reactors, small ones if you want. You can use it however you really want to. But until we get over this hump of saying, let's try it, let's get it going, like the original Manhattan Project scientists wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
then we're going to be at this crossroads of not moving forward on spent fuel. And my real problem with that is that spent fuel is the issue that's holding people back from liking nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems. We'll talk about those in a minute, maybe the rest of them. But the one problem holding back is people think the spent fuel is dangerous and it's something terrible to have around.
Yeah.
And so they're withholding their approval of nuclear power partly because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would they think if you could tell them you could turn that into $100 trillion worth of electricity or 270 years of energy? And right now, the data centers are cranking up and they have no idea where to get electricity for those. So they may be forced into a position where they're going to have to do something pretty quickly to figure this out.
Yeah.
None of this takes a technological leap, and it's far simpler engineering-wise than light water reactors. You don't have high pressure. It's basically a tub of salt, table salt will work. There's other types of salts they want. Fluorine salts they're training. There's something called FLI, which is fluorine, lithium, and beryllium, and that has beryllium has an important aspect that it makes more neutrons. So that's adds a neutron component to it to help with the neutron economy there. But the bottom line is, it's possible. It's been proven, and all we need is, and there are private companies that are in business to do this right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying, let's get going.
Let me show that we are Abhinav Saxena with us. Thank you, Saxena, for coming and make questions, tricky questions for our friend here.
Yeah, of course.
Do you believe that other countries has the same opportunity with this fuel? Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Russia uses this technology right now. Not a lot, not as much as you'd like them to use it for, but they do. They have fast reactors that are working now, and they're usually smaller ones. Although they do have large fixed ones that they have in process, and they're getting ready to start to try to export their technology. Russia has been the most aggressive exporting their nuclear technology to other countries, mostly in Africa, strangely enough.
Including exporting yellow cake to the United States, I suppose.
Well, that's tricky business. It all has to do with politics again. So Russia used to supply us a lot more, but they're not supplying us as much now, mostly because we're in the process of not wanting to buy anything from Russia. So we're stopping that process. And of course, Russia's saying, well, if you're going to be that way, we're going to be that way. So there's an issue with uranium fuel that comes from Russia that we're not taking advantage of. Now, they did send us back in, the 90s, I think it was. They were sending us enriched uranium that they had for bombs that we would downblend into fuel. That worked out pretty well. But of course, they're not doing that anymore. And then now there's a fuel called high assay low enriched uranium So instead of up to 4%, they're going to enrich it up to 20% or almost 20%. And the idea is that now the definition of high enriched uranium is over 20%. And remember the nuclear subs use 90% enriched. So if you have 20% enriched, there's more uranium-235 available to fission. So it makes the physics simpler when you have the neutrons around. And some of these reactor design are saying they want to use that. You know, Bill Gates' reactor, the Natrium reactor, they want to use high assay low enriched uranium. The trouble is there isn't any.
Yeah.
There's not any made, and there's no process right now to make it commercially, although they're getting a lot of government money to push that along. So that's one of the things in Bill Gates's Natrium reactor, that he has to make sure he has the high assay low enriched uranium, but he's counting on the government to produce it. We'll see how that works out. But that's the trick you play.
Yeah, but Russia probably does not have an NRC. And you mentioned that NRC blocks innovation, approves fuel reactors, and adds enormous costs.
There's been a tremendous politicization of the NRC in my estimation, because by law you can't build a reactor without getting it licensed. Okay, and it has to be licensed through the NRC. In the early days, the Atomic Energy Commission was promoting and licensing reactors. Back until 1974 is when they started. Well, 1977 they started the NRC. So the idea was that we shouldn't have the same organization promoting reactors and the same that regulates.
Auditing.
So they set the two apart.
Yeah.
Well, since the anti-nuclear process started becoming politically, the NRC started really getting highly picky on whether they're going to allow reactors to be built or not. And it's resulted in today there's just not licensing any of them.
Wow.
They did license the two Vogtle ones. Okay, they got that done. And they licensed one small modular reactor design, not a construction. So
but what's the motivation from them to make this confusion?
I hate to speak for them, but if you look at it from a perspective of we need power, and we're actually a free enterprise organization,
sure.
And then if you look at it from the perspective of nuclear power is the safest industry. That's the best industrial safety record of any other industry, not just energy industry, any industry. And yet now you're going to put all these onerous safety restrictions on them. Maybe in the early days you should have, because you didn't know you didn't have a track record, so you didn't know how they would work. Now you do. You have almost 70 years of working, and all over the world. Because if you count normal commercial operations, there's never been anybody hurt from them. Okay, because Chernobyl was not under normal operations when it wasn't an accident. In my estimation, it's hard to call that an accident because it wasn't under normal operations. So it's the safest by far industry in the world. And now you want to put the most restrictions on it in the name of safety. It just doesn't make any sense to me unless there's a political motivation. And I'm still trying to ask those questions that you're asking. Why would they do that? Why would they do that?
Why did
and so maybe now they'll have the incentive to really try to cut through that, I hope.
Yeah, but agencies are complicated everywhere in the world, especially in the West countries. East countries, I suppose, they are more focused.
No, they are more dictatorial, and as you know, in Russia and kind of in India, but mostly Russia and China, they just do it because they're told to do it. Well, they're building reactors in China, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 10 a year, light water reactors. They're also now moving into the fast reactor realm. They actually have, I think, one in operation now. And so that's how you learn how it works, is put it in operation and try it, right? Now they're not recycling their spent fuel. Okay. But they're using fast reactor technology. Like Russia is not recycling their spent fuel, but they're using fast reactor technology. So you don't have to go through those hoops in China to get it done. And you don't have to go through those hoops in Russia to get it done. But because we have granted so much power to the central government in our country, and the motivation is not to go nuclear, at least it hasn't been Well, right now they say the motivation is to go nuclear, so at least that's a good thing. But they have not taken the Nuclear Regulatory Commission out of that role of stopping things, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So what I recommend is if you go to build a car, say for instance, you have to meet safety regulations, safety standards, okay? And it's up to you, the car builder, to meet those standards. And if the government comes and asks you, you have to show them how you met those standards. But with nuclear reactors, it's like approving every car that goes on the market would have to have somebody look at that specific car design and that specific car construction and approve each car coming off of the line, which is ridiculous. And cars are inherently far more dangerous than reactors when you count how many people are injured and killed with them. So to me, it doesn't make any sense on a high level to do this.
Mhm.
And so my ambition is to try to say, why don't we set standards for the industry and let the industry build all of them that they want, as long as they adhere to the standards. Now you get competition. Now you get the ones that do the best job and build the best deal for the customer will be the ones that get marketed.
Mhm.
And so that's what I'm trying to say is why do we might not need an NRC anymore, because we have this 70-year almost perfect safety record. Okay. And in my mind, that just doesn't compute. And I don't know anybody who can refute that. I haven't heard any argument as why that makes any sense.
Yeah, and who are planning to spend $400 billion to
Oh,
hide?
they don't have the money. They have they collected money from ratepayer. A lot of people don't know this, and this is not true of wind and solar. But for nuclear, they collected all the money up front during the reactor operations and sales of the electricity to decommission the reactor at the end. They collected all the money up front to take care of the spent nuclear fuel at the end of it. All of it's collected up in a fund at the end of this thing. And for almost 30 years, they collected a fee that the government put in a lockbox, okay, to deal with the spent nuclear fuel. And now that fund with they stopped. So here's what happened. All the utilities said, well, you're not doing anything, right? Back in 2014, you haven't got a repository, you don't even have a solution. And so why are you charging this money? So they had a lawsuit. So we want all the money back that we paid in plus interest. And we don't want you to charge anymore. Well, the resolution of that was you're not getting all your money back, but we won't charge anymore. So they're not charging now for the spent fuel solution until they have a solution. Then they can start charging again. And that's been since 2014. So there's been no charges since then because there's no solution, not even a proposed solution. And so that money that collected by the government is sitting in a fund. It's called the Congressional Nuclear Waste Fund, and it's up over $50 billion now with interest. It's, of course, in T-bills. It's being held, and the interest of the T-bills has built up over $50 billion. Well, that's not $400 billion. So they're going to have to find some money with it. And that might be one of the reasons they don't want to do it. Is because who wants to spend all that money? Mm-hmm. So it might end up just sitting at the tarmacs on the reactor sites for a long time, which it's perfectly safe there. I mean, there's no reason why they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But there's a push to first get an interim storage facility and then to get a permanent repository. And so I don't know the real motivation behind that, but thankfully they don't have the money to do that.
Yeah. Is it a federal regulation and all states are the same in the US, or are they are different? Texas, for instance, more independent?
That's an interesting question. Because Nevada, this is where I cut my teeth on the spent fuel issues in Nevada when they had the Yucca Mountain project. They were going to bury it in a mountain out in Nevada. And I thought, boy, you're really crazy, Nevada, not to take advantage of this deal. Because I knew that they would never bury it. I knew they would use it to make energy. So if you got it into your state and they wanted to make energy from it, you're in a real good position. But Nevada fought and legal battles and delays. And finally, they got Harry Reid in there. And even though the law says it's going in Yucca Mountain, Harry Reid got the money stopped. He got together with Obama and they stopped the funding for it. So even though it's still the law of the land, they never bothered to change the law. There's no funding for it, so it's not going forward. It's kind of a crazy way to run a government, but that's what they did. And so now their idea is to have an interim storage facility, which means takes half of the spent fuel and move it. The proposed places are one place in New Mexico and one place about 125 miles down the road into Texas, okay? And put it there for only 40 years, then we'll move it. Well, New Mexico and Texas are looking at this track record of 45 years and saying, what if you don't ever do anything about it? If you move it out here and don't do anything about it, then we're stuck with it. So they're fighting. I think they'll be able to prevent it just like Nevada did. There's any number of legal delays that they can throw in the way that will never happen. That's what Nevada's still doing. Just legal delay, never happened. So right now, there's no plan to even move it off of the sites. And like I said, there's plenty safe on the sites where it is now. Trouble is, it's increasing by 2,000 metric tons a year. So now you kind of have a renewable. You can call this renewable if we go to fast reactor recycle, because there's always being more made. Every time you have any nuclear power plant out there that's not recycling it, it's making more. So you're always going to have more made of this material. And there's a lot of other factors built into it as far as what design you use for the new reactors and whether you go light water or fast reactor or how you do all that. But you can imagine the whole world has about 5 times the amount of nuclear power production than we do. So this material is sitting everywhere, all over the world. And we could be the leaders in making that happen. But and the technology is available to do that. And it's actually private companies capitalized to do that.
They have
So
money
they
enough
see
to
a
do
profit
that.
motivated, even though they know they don't have a chance for revenue in 10 years. They're still getting investors investing in it. So they can see the future. Okay.
This is a good point, because you mentioned data centers are hungry for power, but at the same time, the time needed to put these plants available are too long for nuclear.
Well, depends whether you're talking politically or technically.
Oh,
Like I said, technically, it's much simpler than light water reactors. You don't need a lot of innovation to do this. You're basically putting molten salt into a steel container, and you need really special steel, okay? You need really pure molten salt or sodium or whatever design you want to use. It's up to you. But that's not magic. That's not hard to do. I mean, we can make table salt, so we can make any kind of salt we want. And if you do the liquid fuel part, all you got to do is chlorinate the material that's in the spent fuel, and it is all can have a chlorine. You can chlorinate it all once you figure out how to do that. So there's nothing magical sitting in the way of it, and there's nothing expensive or special that's needed for it, like high pressure. Light water reactors need a lot of high pressure pipes in them. Well, that's tricky business. That's tough engineering, and you got to really look into that to make sure that you've got the right material for that. But a molten salt reactor would be room pressure, plus it would be a higher heat. Okay, so now you can start using the advantage of making direct heat instead of making electricity and turning it into heat.
Okay.
So that includes that possibility as well. So there's a lot of good technical commercial reasons to do this. And the data centers, what they want nuclear power because they know it is on all the time. Okay, they don't want any break in their power.
Sure.
What they're trying to convince them to do is, if we have an emergency, we'll shut down your data centers.
Sure.
Well, they don't want that. They don't want that at all. So they're pushing hard for nuclear. That's why they've gotten a hold of 3 Mile Island now. And they're going to open that back up to produce a data center power. So some of these reactors that were put in safe store, not decommissioned, can be brought brought back to life. And there's a few of them. There's a lot of them now. 4 or 5 of them they're looking at bringing back into production. Susquehanna in Pennsylvania and Duane Arnold in Arkansas, and Texas has 2 reactors in their state. So there's one in Michigan that's already ready to come online. It's already turned on again. It's already going through the process of certification in a ready state, and it won't be long before they'll turn that one right back online. It's in Michigan. And so you're really seeing a different idea of nuclear power, and it's driven by hugely influential companies now. The data companies are very, very politically connected and influential.
And not only time to put available these plants, but the costs. You mentioned your arc that can become from $3 per kilowatt hour to 1 cent.
Oh yeah,
Oh, it's a
Yeah, because
fantastic.
now you have almost infinite fuel.
Uh-huh.
If you have 270 years worth of our current um, um, uh, output of electricity and fuel right now, 2,000 tons at a minimum will be made in the next at least 30 or 40 years, even if we don't put another reactor online. And so you're going to have this material available. And if you can do this process, you can do with the depleted uranium, which I remember I told you there's 5 or 6 or sometimes even 100 times more depleted uranium than there is enriched uranium. Then you can do that for millennia. Okay. But we really only need it for about 100 years, because think of 100 years ago. Certainly, if we're around and we're innovative and we're thinking 100 years from now, it'll be a whole different idea of energy production. So we probably won't need it more than 100 years, maybe until fusion comes on or space-based power, whatever the next leap is. So we can basically burn this as much as we want to,
Hmm.
burn it as fast as we want to. And you can think of the possibilities. Now you got unlimited fuel, so it's already being made. The reactors are fairly inexpensive to build because there's the vat with
Hmm.
molten salt, and it's more complicated than that,
And
but not a lot.
mhm. You mentioned that Michigan is part of this game,
Hmm.
quote, game. But Michigan is applying money to natural gas in the data
Yeah,
centers.
yeah,
Is
they
it, is
have
there a
to.
competition between nuclear and natural gas?
If I have my way, it will be. We want open competition for all energy sources. We want a free market society,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
Because that way, that's where the customer gets the best deal. Now, monopolies and utilities may not get the best deal.
Yeah.
They like to keep it the way it is because now they can charge whatever they want. All they got to do is convince the state to go along with it. But if the market is competitive and somebody's selling power for 3 cents a kilowatt hour, I think they're going to buy it from that company instead of buy it from another company at 13 cents a kilowatt hour. The reason it's so possible is there's so much of it. So, supply and demand. If there's a lots of demand and no supply, the price goes up. But if there's lots of supply and the demand is not as much, then you can lower that cost. And so you can imagine an idea where if it gets down to a penny kilowatt hour, there's a lot of things we can do with electricity that we can't do it now because we can't afford it. Desalination of water is one. You can put a gigawatt reactor right next to a desalination plant, and you can have really cheap water. If it's a penny kilowatt hour, you can get all the fresh water you want out of that plant for very, very inexpensive money. And so it's all about of looking at this from a free enterprise perspective and let the magic of free enterprise and
Uh-huh.
invention and innovation come into the game. Well, with the government control of it, you never get any of that.
Hmm.
All they want now is the money from the government. That's all these companies want. They want to get money from the government, so they're not looking to the innovation of the future right yet. Although some of them are, the startup companies are. They
Hmm.
just are not allowed to proceed.
Yeah.
So you can see how a data center could build a power reactor right next to a data center. You won't even need the national grid.
Sure.
They can supply their own power.
Yeah.
Now, the
Very,
utilities
very
don't like
close.
that
Yeah.
one little bit.
Yeah.
They don't like that idea at all. They're fighting that idea. But the way innovation works is the customer demand will control it eventually.
Yeah.
Innovation, invention, and customer demand will overcome all this monopoly inertia that we have. And I might not be alive, and you might not believe, but we need to set it up for next generation. That's part of our
Yes.
calling.
Sure. You mentioned that 20% of energy in the United States is made from nuclear. In
Right.
France, I suppose, is 70%, and they are
Yeah.
exporting to Germany the
Yes.
energy. How do you
Yes.
see this leadership in nuclear?
Um, France was very smart, and they're not as free enterprises. The government took control of it and moved it
Oh,
back in the 60s. Okay, they said we're going to build this design, and we're going to build them all over the place, and that's what we're going to do. So everybody said, yes, sir, that's what we're going to do, and that's what they did, and it worked out very, very well for them. Okay, now what they're doing is reprocessing their fuel, not recycling it. Okay, there's a difference. Reprocessing means they'll chemically reduce it, and they'll add plutonium and U-235 based uh, um, uh, uranium to the mix until they get a high enough percentage that they can now burn it again into a reactor. But they can only do that once. And so again, like I said, you're never going to get over that 0.7% original amount of U-235, but you can breed all the plutonium-239 you want. And when the reactor gets done, there is some plutonium-239 left in it. So what they're trying to is to enrich that part of it, put it back into another fuel canister, and stick it back in reactors. It takes a little different design reactor to do that, but that's what they're doing. They call that reprocessing, but they're still not getting more than about 5 or 6% out of the whole thing, because you only start out with 4% and you're not adding any more U-235, so you can only get so much out of it. But if you're going to turn that 95% into plutonium and put that in the reactor, you can then go all the way up theoretically to 99%, but we're saying 90%, and get that advantage for the energy process. So yes, they've been very successful at reprocessing, and they take their fuel right from reactor right into the reprocessing center. And they did that for Japan for a while. Japan would ship over all their spent fuel, they'd reprocess it in France, and they ship everything back to them. So even the dregs and the extras, they ship everything back to Japan, to the point where Japan was building their own reprocessing factory when Fukushima hit and set that back. So they were going to go into that business themselves and reprocess their own fuel. And so France has reprocessed fuel for other countries.
Other countries exporting to Germany.
Again, it's not 99%. It's not 90%. It's only about 5 or 6%. So you're getting a little bit more, not a lot more. But they've been very successful at that.
Yeah, for France is 70% of electricity from nuclear, and the United States 20. What's the good number for the United States you see to reach?
I'd like 100%, but I don't think we'll ever see that. You know, we're not going to do away with fossil fuels. I'm a big fan of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels got us clean through the industrial ages, man, and really set us up for technology to be a high technical leader of the world. So I think fossil fuels are a fine fuel. Yeah. And I think if the fossil fuel companies were smart, and I think they're starting to come around, they'd see nuclear as a follow-on energy source at the end of their fossil fuel time. But that's not going to be for 2 generations. So it's not like they're going to go out of business. It's not like we're stopping all the fossil fuels, although they tried. They'll never be able to do that. And so you're going to see this transition from a customer demand side, because it's competition. So like I said, once they build reactors that are going to start cranking out, 1 or 2 cent per kilowatt hour retail energy, then they're either going to have to compete with it on natural gas and fossil fuel, or they're going to go. There's going to be more of the other plants built. But that's going to take 2 generations. So nobody's going to get put out of business by this. And fossil fuels would be smart to think about this, and I think they are coming around to it, because it's not going to put them out of business. They're smart to look at the future of energy, not just the future of fossil fuels. And so once they had this whole administration to try to shut down all of fossil fuels, of course, they fought against that. And they're successful, fought against it. They don't care about renewables because they know renewables will never compete with them. But they were trying to shut down nuclear power from the fossil fuel perspective because they saw it as a competition. But you'll see, if they look at it as a follow-on process to what they're already doing now, I think they'll embrace it, which they were back in the 60s. All the fossil fuel companies, oil companies were embracing nuclear power until we got the whole thing set back because of the 3 Mile Island panic. Okay, it was just a panic. So now we're coming back to where we need this. And so I think the people who want to market energy, and of course, oil is all for transportation energy, and coal and natural gas is for electricity energy. Okay. So we're going to have oil for a long, long time, because it's going to be a while before electric cars are going to take over. But imagine if you're getting what a penny per kilowatt hour means is you're getting all the power you want for almost free. If you get that, then you could probably electrify roads to charge the cars as they go. That's something you can see in 2 generations down the road. So then that would make electric cars very, very practical, because it could be very light. They don't have to have 1,100 pound batteries.
But not for petrochemicals. But
petrochemicals, if they're smart, they'll see the light and start getting into that business, okay? And start getting on the forward edge of that innovation. Because if they don't, somebody else will. Like I said, the only thing holding it back is governments are providing subsidies for people to compete, especially wind and solar, which can't stand on its own. I don't care what they tell you. Can't stand on its own. And if they don't get the subsidies, they'll all be out of business. So now what do you do with the farmer who's getting $8,000 a year to rent his property, put a windmill on it? Now they stop his $8,000 a year. What is he going to want? He's going to want you to get that windmill the heck out of here. And so there's huge amounts of concrete in these windmills just to keep them so that they don't blow over. There are huge, huge forces involved in this. And so how do you take, concrete that's down 10, 15 feet in the ground and get rid of it? That forms a pillar 10, 12 feet in the sky just to hold this thing up. The farmer's going to want that down. Do you remember in the 60s when they had the Superfund sites for the toxic stuff? Because the companies just went out of business and walked away, and they still had to clean it up. So the EPA would go back and sue all these companies and try to squeeze them, but they would put up money up front to clean the sites up. Well, if these wind and solar companies all go out of business, who's going to be left to take it down? Well, taxpayers are going to be left to take it down. And so we're going to see that transition. Armando, this is going to happen. It may not happen in my lifetime, but it is going to happen. There's no other way around it, especially with the data center demand. They're going to have to make this decision. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. My last point for you. Do you believe that the private companies and associations are enough organized to make a movement in pro of this?
Oh, that's an interesting question. In my opinion, what I see is they're all promoting their own technology. Okay, each promoting their own technology. They're not getting together as an industry to form a next generation nuclear power consortium like the Petroleum Institute does, or like the other fossil fuel groups do, form a group that promotes all of fossil fuel or promotes all of wind and solar. That part has not materialized in the nuclear side. So there's a lot of companies out there promoting their own reactor type, which is fine, but it's like trying to promote, highway cars when you don't have any highways.
Sure.
I mean, you need to build the highways, somehow get the highways built first.
Yeah,
so part of what we're trying to do is get them to organize to promote the movement of nuclear energy. And we think that the value of the spent fuel would be a good motivator for somebody to start that down the road. And we don't think, we think only the political motivation would come from the states.
Right. Yeah.
Because the federal government has no political motivation to do this, or hasn't shown any political motivation.
Wow.
A lot of talk. And there's a lot of talk in the states.
Yeah.
But none of them still will consent to accept the spent nuclear fuel. Even if they do come up with an idea for a repository, they won't consent to accept it. And then they won't even consent to accept the interim storage facilities, even though they're approved by the NRC to go in. They have the plans. They spent all this money. These companies spent this money on plans for the interim storage sites. But Texas and New Mexico are delaying them in court.
Yeah.
They'll be able to do that forever, just like Nevada did. So until we find some sensibility in this system and get somebody to come together to see it, why do they come together? Profit. Well, $100 trillion, I don't know about you, but that's,
it's too much money. Yeah.
That's not too much. I mean, that's kind of a little bit of money.
Yeah.
There's enough to go around for everybody.
Yeah.
Do you know how much $100 million is? It's $300,000 per person in the United States. People think a trillion, not a trillion. A trillion is $3,000 for every person in the United States. And we're talking trillions like it's, sitting at the Treasury ready to go.
Yeah.
So, excuse me.
Sure.
So we need to have this consciousness among people to say, wait a second. We want the advantages of low-cost electricity. And maybe the world could use this, because you imagine free electricity in Africa could take all of these people out of poverty. They could
stable, dispatchable, reduced cost, easy to do.
And everybody's life is surrounded with, nobody can do without electricity. Everybody's life counts on electricity.
Yeah,
and if you're a rich country and you have a high quality of life, you have a lot of electricity. If you have a low quality of life, you have no electricity.
Yeah.
So if it depends on what you want. Do you want to keep the profits in? Are you after the profits? Are you after the monopoly? Or do you really want to go out there to the world and market something that could really raise everybody's quality of life?
Yeah.
Now that's a long-term fairy tale idea of it, but I think it's very valid. And I think we'd like to try to inspire this to go forward.
Yeah, that's right.
And I tried not to get too excited about this, Armando.
Very good. Very good.
I appreciate all the questions.
Thank you so much, Stephen Curtis. It was a pleasure to listen from you.
It's
these
always a
thoughts
pleasure,
and,
Armando. I hope we can do
fantastic.
this again sometime.
Sure, for time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.